can you please help with the fear of hunger? All of my automatic and unintentional eating before I'm hungry, and eating past enough all comes from a fear of getting hungry. She says, I know hunger is not an emergency and I will always have enough food, but my body treats it like it's something to be terrified of. Such a good question.
I know this was such a good question because there is a huge difference between like knowing something cognitively and then feeling it in your body, right? So, she says this, she says, I know hunger isn't an emergency. And we talk about that quite often, with our members on our podcast. Hunger is just a bodily cue and you should respond to it appropriately, right? Just like when you have to go to the bathroom.
You're chilled.
You're chilled.
Tired.
You have these bodily cues and then you go meet the need, right? It's just a need. So what happens, and honestly, this can be due to a couple different things. Like these overreactions to hunger, it's either sometimes I see people that overreact to hunger, and then the other one is just a fear of hunger and they won't let themselves feel hungry. So they're eating all the time. This can be due to some traumatic event in your past. Maybe, you weren't getting enough food as a child, something like that. That's awful. And I would highly recommend therapy if that is the case. A lot of our members have this from years of restrictive dieting, which is essentially like kind of a forced state of starvation. Yeah, like a self-imposed. No one's doing it to you. You're doing it to yourself. And so now over time, a lot of people probably, on their first diet, they could knuckle down and get through it. But by the time you're 20 years into this restrictive dieting cycle, you may find your tolerance for experiencing like hunger, discomfort, whatever is very low, where, when you were 20, you could sustain that for 3 months. Now you're 43 and you at best can get 3 days into a restrictive diet, right? Like your body just like overpowers your best intentions, I would say, which is a good thing. That's a good thing. That is your body striving to take care of you.
Yeah.
Right. And so what is the journey, right? Like, how do we learn to tolerate hunger? And I would say just one little step at a time. And number one, you never have to do this. Okay. That is an option for anyone. You never have to do this. You never have to get hungry again. Number two, if you want to be able to feel hunger and not fear it and not overreact to it, it's just one little step at a time, and it really is a journey. There's people listening that could maybe relate to having fears of other things. I don't like mice. I used to be deathly afraid of mice. If I even saw a mouse trap,
it's true,
I would lose it. Yeah,
I can validate for this.
Today, I've desensitized myself a little bit. I've pushed through some discomfort. I still don't like mice. I would still probably scream if I saw one run across behind me or something. But I am not near what I used to be. And that also took one step at a time. I also have no desire to increase that tolerance. Gross. Anyways. When I was approaching, everyone is going to have to decide what the steps are for them. Like, what do I need? I'll share what my process was. It really is kind of like exposure therapy, right? So hunger is kind of the last eating skill that I personally touched. And that was very same to this person. I had a fear of getting hungry after years and years of dieting, and I would engage in fasting. So I would fast for days, 2 days. And that was it was very harmful to me. So the first thing I did, what I know in those moments, what I know I'm overreacting to is feeling unsafe. Like I'm not going to get my very, primary needs met. And so I know that I need to rebuild self-trust. I need to trust myself that I am going to feed myself when I get hungry. So the work for me was, number one, starting that conversation with myself, right? When you get hungry, you are going to eat. Yes, hunger is not an emergency. And we have this huge breach in self-trust where for years, when you got hungry, you wouldn't feed yourself. So it's like reestablishing this relationship with myself where I trust that I'm going to feed myself. The first thing I did was I only practiced at one meal. So I like chose lunch as the time. I wasn't going to eat until I felt hunger cues. And I would always have something in the fridge ready to go to eat. So it was just kind of a very quick. So when I felt hunger, I could eat. It wasn't like I feel hungry and now I have to make a sandwich, because I knew I'd probably just be shoveling food into my mouth by the in that very moment. So I would feel hunger and I would eat. And then I would feel hunger and let myself feel hunger for a few moments. Just feel this, right? And I would sit in it and I would kind of like self-soothe as I felt that hunger. It was like, okay, this is just hunger. And knowing that the biggest thing that I had to reestablish was self-trust, it's like if somebody in your life betrayed you, how would you reestablish trust with them, right? You need to see that person say what they're going to do and then follow through. And that's the same process I took with myself. Okay, we're feeling hunger. We're okay. I'm going to feed myself. Go to the fridge, get my food, feed myself. And it just took time of following through on that, right? It was very uncomfortable initially, but after a while, I built momentum, and like today I'm like, wow, that feels easy, right? But it took time.
Yeah, I think that's what I hear, and what I really appreciate about your approach there, Jen, is that you didn't just try to talk yourself out of feeling fearful of hunger. You recognized, okay, I'm feeling hunger and I'm a little worried, I'm a little uncomfortable, and I can feed myself at any point. I've got food available. Like, you created that safety net. So the minute it did feel too much or too intense, you could feed yourself. So you just baby stepped your way into.
Yes, I baby stepped my way into becoming somebody who could feel hunger and respond appropriately to it.
Yeah. I can't relate. I haven't felt fearful of hunger, but I do remember having I hope I always remember this. I had a moment. I was in a parking lot. I think I was doing a school run, and I got hungry, and I noticed that my next thought was, we have to stop for food. And keep in mind, I lived like a 10-minute drive from the school, but it felt so like such an emergency that
Urgent,
I couldn't even make it 10 minutes. And I remember thinking, you have food at home. It's 10 minutes. Let's give it a go. And I did.
Yeah.
I lived to tell about it. And I was like, oh, okay. Like,
Yeah.
that's a fork in the road for me, where I've always just been overeating or reactively eating because of some mild hunger. And I can handle it. I'm okay.
Yeah, it's like if you were sitting in the car and you were like, I need to go to the bathroom. And we're like, I need to pull into that McDonald's and use the bathroom right now. But it's actually, you could probably wait the 10 minutes and go to the bathroom when you get home, right? It's just we have these bodily cues and we overreact to them. Now, what can happen is when we do deny hunger for a long time, our hunger cues can feel wonky. Now, this is another super common experience I see with new members. They don't really feel hunger until they're hangry, till it's like nauseating, I'm going to pass out. Well, yeah, when you are at that level of hunger, you are going to start shoveling food into your mouth like it's just a conveyor belt. Like, that's a very normal reaction to being that hungry. Just like if you really had to go to the bathroom that bad, you would stop at the McDonald's on the way home to go.
Yeah.
So the work there is also noticing earlier hunger cues, right? So it's kind of slowing things down in your world around a meal that you can get some mindfulness around, like maybe not like dinner time if you have kids and it's all chaotic. Maybe it is breakfast, maybe it is lunch. And it's slowing things down maybe an hour before you typically feel that hanger, right? So an hour before, what does my stomach feel like? Do I have early signs of hunger? And for me, they were there. They were there. I did have little rumbles in my tummy that were building up. I had just been ignoring them for so many years that I was just on autopilot, not listening, right? So you
Yeah.
might have to slow things down too at first.
Yeah, so I think there's kind of like two parts. There's recognizing the difference between like physical hunger, she mentioned, unintentional or intentional eating, automatic eating, emotional hunger, right? But then there's also, as you're talking about, nailing that sweet spot of I'm hungry, I'm not too hungry,
Yes.
where I'm now like I'm inclined to eat anything and everything and overeat, or I feel just
Yes.
physically unwell, but I'm appropriately hungry and I can respond and appropriately, in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sets you up for success. Yeah, good question.